Today we're in eastern Arizona in Petrified Forest National Park, which is a cool place because of all this stuff. Petrified wood. This is petrified wood. Basically, it's a fossil of a tree that lived over 200 million years ago. If you look closely, you can see fossilized growth rings, and every once in a while, you can find some pretty excellently preserved bark patterns. If you like to find petrified wood, you have to come to eastern Arizona, because here, it's all over the place. It's everywhere. Basically, it's littered with these awesome tree fossils that are over 200 million years old, so they're from a heck of a long time ago. But basically, this place is one big barren desert. So why are there so many tree fossils here? Good question. Let's break it down with some help from Kirby and her paper cutouts. Alright, so 225 million years ago when dinosaurs were hanging out on Earth, all of Earth's land masses were in one giant clump called Pangea, and Arizona was located around here, on its western edge near the equator, nowhere near where it is now. Back then, Arizona didn't look like this. It was a tropical paradise. Hard to believe, but yeah. There were rivers and streams and all sorts of animals and plants everywhere, including trees that were almost 200 feet tall. Those 200-foot tall trees lived near rivers. When they died, more often than not, they would fall into the water. This would happen to a lot of trees, which would form log jams like this one. Right here, this is where a huge log jam happened. All these logs were buried and a mass petrification event occurred. Mass petrification, pretty neat, right? Well, here's how it happened. There were a bunch of volcanoes hanging out to the west and south of here that kept spewing out ash. As the volcanic ash flew into the air, it was caught by the wind, which would spread it out all over the place, and sometimes the ash would land in rivers and streams. Volcanic ash is made up of a bunch of stuff, but mostly silica. Silica dissolves in water, so back in the day, it found its way into the rivers and eventually into the sunken logs. In the logs, the silica recrystallized, forming quartz crystals, which filled every open area of the sunken trees until eventually they were pure stone. Okay, so you got a log, you got a stream, you add some volcanoes, a bit of ash, mix it all together, wait a couple million years, and boom, petrified wood. Simple as that. The coolest thing about petrified logs are probably their amazing colors, which are made by traces of minerals like iron and manganese. There's milky clear quartz, purple amethyst, and yellow citron. Carbon also turns things a little black, and chromium makes them look kinda greenish. All of these come together to create some really spectacular looking fossils. Alright, so back to Kirby's art. Millions of years go by, unfortunately the dinosaurs don't make it, and Pangea breaks up. Over time, all those streams and rivers disappeared, giving us the lush, radiant, bone-dry landscape of present-day eastern Arizona. So these logs are fossilized records of trees that lived over 200 million years ago. Most are a species called Arcarioxylon arizonicum, or something like that. But the cool thing is that every single species of tree they found fossilized in this park doesn't exist anymore. They're all extinct. On top of that, people keep jacking this stuff as souvenirs, and I don't blame them because, I mean, it's everywhere. But that's turning into a problem. The park is losing petrified wood very quickly. How quickly? Very quickly. In one survey that examined just how fast people were pulling the old Sticky Fingers McGee at this park, most test sites were decimated within a week. It took 1 week for people to steal all the rocks at these locations. Which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, think about what you're doing, guys. You're stealing from a national park. These are like the last pure places on Earth. How about you exercise a little restraint and stop stealing from the National Park Service? I believe in you. The neat thing is, you can find petrified wood pretty much anywhere, in every state in the United States and in some other countries too. So you might even be able to find some in your own backyard. A nice piece of tree history from over 200 million years ago, and that's pretty cool. What's up, guys? My name is Charlie. That's Patrick. Kirby's filming right now, and today we're in California, in Monterey, to check out an underwater forest. While exploring the US, we visited some of the coolest forests in the entire country, but we were in the mood for something really different. So we came here to Monterey to check out kelp forests, and our friends Alex and Sabine showed us some of their favorite spots.
Monterey Bay harbors some of the richest aquatic environments in the entire West Coast and some of the coolest kelp forests you've ever seen in your entire life, so we had to check them out.
The water in Monterey was insanely cold, so we wetsuited up. Kirby and I threw on some scuba tanks. Pat went freediving because he's a boss, gonna hold his breath for like 45 minutes, and with cameras in hand, we submerged into the forest canopy.
Swimming through the kelp was one of the coolest things we've ever done.
We were weaving through the enormous kelp columns, light was shining through the canopy, the seafloor was teeming with life. All different sorts of things we've never seen before. It was really incredible. There's no way we could have seen all this stuff from outside of the water. Here's what we found out while diving. Kelp forests are awesome. They're like super cool underwater forests, and to a few bio nerds, what could possibly be cooler than that? Well, the honest answer is probably nothing. So obviously we had an incredible time down there, and we found out that kelp are super cool organisms too. I mean, for one thing, they're one of the fastest growing organisms in the entire world. They can grow up to 2 feet in a single day, super quick. Think about that this way. It took Patrick 17 years to grow 6 feet. Kelp grow much more quickly. So to grow 6 feet, take a piece of kelp Monday, Tuesday, and maybe a bit of Wednesday.
Crazy thing is, these speed growers aren't even a kind of plant. They're actually a kind of brown algae.
One of the main differences between algae and plants is that algae do not have vascular systems. Plants have all sorts of internal tubes that allow them to soak up nutrients through their roots, but algae do not. In algae, every single cell absorbs its own nutrients.
Alright, so right off the bat, kelp are not plants. But even so, kelp in kelp forests are really similar to trees in normal forests.
For one thing, both kelp and trees obtain energy through absorbing sunlight. Roots hold trees in place, and holdfasts keep kelp in place, fastening them to rock-type things. Trees have trunks, kelp have similar structures named stipes, trees have leaves, and kelp have blades, pretty leafish and physically similar. Normal forests change from season to season, and kelp forests do too, in pretty much the same exact way. In fall, one by one, all the blades fall off the kelp. In winter, everything's pretty much dead because storms roll in, and then things come back to life in the spring, so it's pretty much like a normal forest.
Alright, so we got it. They're similar to forests, and they're not too bad looking either.
I've never had an experience that literally took my breath away, but the first time I rolled over while underwater and looked up at this kelp, I literally gasped and couldn't breathe. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But then, I started breathing again, because if I didn't, my lungs would have exploded, because that's kind of how scuba diving works. So there are many different kinds of kelp in Monterey, but we found out that there are 2 main kinds. There's giant kelp and then bull kelp. If you need something more specific, you gotta check out the pneumaticis. Pneumaticis are like little kelp water wings. They're tiny bladders of air that keep kelp afloat. Bull kelp and giant kelp have different kinds of pneumaticis. Bull kelp have one giant one at the top that keep things afloat like a big hot air balloon, and giant kelp have smaller ones attached to each individual blade that together keep the kelp afloat.
One pneumaticis, bull kelp. Many pneumaticis, giant kelp.
Pneumaticis allow kelp to grow upwards towards the surface, and this gives them a distinct canopy and understory feel. So even though we were underwater, it felt like we were in an actual forest, meandering our way through enormous trees, but it felt more like we were flying through a forest, since we could go up and down and check out every area of this underwater ecosystem.
Just like a normal forest, the canopy and understory each support their own unique microenvironments.
We ran into so many different things down there, like tiny fish, tinier fish, even tinier fish, a group of curious seals that swam right up next to us. There were crabs and barnacles, starfish, tons of giant sluggy things, this crazy underwater mini Dr. Seuss tree, and these awesome hungry cormorants that swam around us for a super long time.
It was really incredible to experience, but the tricky thing is, sometimes the kelp forest starts supporting things that they don't really want to be there, specifically purple sea urchins.
Purple sea urchins are the worst. There's no other way to say it. They're pokey and ugly, and on top of that, they absolutely wreck kelp forests. Sea urchins collect in herds underwater. Yes, herds, like herds of cattle, but they're tiny tennis ball-sized, spiky sea monster herds. They move around in these herds and graze on kelp, like cows on grass. And unfortunately, they graze a little too much and decimate these forests at a rate of 30 feet per month, which is super quick for these tiny little sea cows.
Our biggest advocate in the fight against sea urchins and the protection of kelp forests, sea otters.
Sea otters prey on urchins. They eat them up for breakfast and are generally adorable. They do their best to demolish, destroy, devour, and, according to Patrick, body slam sea urchins, which helps ensure that kelp stick around for some time.
So kelp forests, similar to trees but still aren't plants, have pneumatocysts, are dependent on sea otters, and are seriously fun to swim through.
Hey guys, just one thing real quick before we get started here. This is not an instructional video because that would be crazy. We are not experts at anything. We got help from a whole lot of experienced, good-looking professionals to make this work, like Mark and Justin and Dave and Jed too. He's that kid on the right. So if you want to learn how to tree climb like us, take lessons from them here. Oh shoot, it's time to start the show. Let's go. Hey guys, it's Charlie. Today I'm actually going to tell you a story about my little sister Kirby. So Kirby's pretty awesome, and I'm going to tell you why. When we planned our expedition to visit the coolest forests in the entire US, Kirby wasn't satisfied at first. She didn't just want to visit the forests, she actually wanted to take it a step further and climb the trees. So we made some changes, got some equipment, went to Cornell University to learn how to climb, and went up some pretty incredible trees in some really awesome forests. And it was great and all, except it still wasn't really cutting it for Kirby. Because you see, when Kirby decides to do something, she doesn't do things halfway. She does things whole way and kicks in an extra half or two just for good measure. Here are a few examples. Once, Kirby decided she wanted to raise chickens, so she spent 2 months designing and building a chicken coop in our backyard with her bare hands. When she realized all the bees in the world were dying, she interviewed the best bee experts across the country, raised 15,000 bees, and harvested 85 pounds of honey in one summer. So yeah, Kirby's pretty intense. So when we decided we were gonna go climb some trees, Kirby didn't want to climb just any tree. She wanted to climb the biggest trees in the entire world, a giant sequoia. Yeah, a giant sequoia, which is pretty nuts because giant sequoias can be up to 310 feet tall. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty. Kirby, by comparison, is only 5'2", which is significantly shorter than the Statue of Liberty, so this wasn't going to be easy. And for whatever reason, just climbing to the top still wasn't enough for Kirby. Kirby didn't want to climb to the top of a giant sequoia. She wanted to climb to the top, set up a hammock, and spend a night there, like sleep there, overnight, at the top of a giant sequoia. So we made it happen. The first thing we did was hit up our friends at Cornell Tree Climbing and Berkeley University who were studying sequoias in California. We were all like, hey Cornell, how's it going? And they were like, hey Charlie, what's cracking? All right, so get this. Kirby wants to climb a giant sequoia. Go on. And spend the night at the top of the tree. Oh shoot, that's crazy, man. Tell me about it. Kirby's a boss. Can we climb one of your trees? Oh, for sure, Charles. Awesome. Sick. Cool. All right, see you later. I love you. Cool, thanks. Bye. Ooh. So we came to this place, which is their research site just outside Sequoia National Forest. And here, there are giant sequoias all over the place. It's amazing. People from Cornell and Berkeley climb these trees all the time for a study they're doing about seed cones. They're doing an awesome job on some really important research over there. And when we were walking around the forest, Kirby decided that this was the bad boy she was gonna climb. Why? Because it's enormous. And when Kirby does something, she does it right. So, it was time to get ready to climb. When you climb a tree the way we do, one of the first things you gotta do is toss your rope over a branch near the top of the tree. But the tricky thing is, it's really hard to throw your rope really high, and we had to get it up 300 feet, so this really wasn't gonna happen. We had to figure out something else, and this is why Kirby's been hauling around this crossbow. Here's how the whole thing works. First, you take one of these arrow things and thread it with a fishing line. You pull back the bowstring, load it, aim at a branch, and let her loose.
Then you find your arrow, attach the fishing line to a bigger line, use the fishing reel at the front to reel in your line, attach a bigger line to your rope, pull that one in, and just like that, after a few knots, your line is ready to go. So now it's time for Kirby to climb. The first thing she did was clip her ascenders to the rope. So this is an ascender. It's what attaches you to your rope and keeps you from falling. Cool. So now it's time for Kirby to get on up that giant sequoia. Game on, man. Giddy up. Let's roll. Inside Kirby's ascenders are some crazy sharp teeth pointed downwards, so these nifty little teeth let you slide your rope up but not down. Your ascenders are attached to your harness, which holds all your weight. So to climb, all Kirby has to do is move her ascenders one at a time up the tree, and she's on her way. This whole thing requires a lot more choreography than you might think. So if you watch Kirby, attached to your bottom ascender is a loop of webbing that you put your foot in. So first you step into that front loop and stand up. As Kirby stands up, she also pushes her top ascender up the rope. Then she sits down and can pull her bottom ascender up the rope too. By sitting in her harness and then standing up in that front foot loop, she can put all her weight on either her top or bottom ascender. When one of the ascenders is free, it can move up the rope. So it's a little confusing to manage, but Kirby got the hang of it pretty quick. And soon enough, she was making her way up to the top of this enormous tree. Kirby had to do this for a long time to make it up the entire tree, about 80 minutes. It was like completing an hour and 20-minute full-body workout. It's pretty tough, while also dodging branches and dangling hundreds of feet in the air. It's tiring, it's hard, and at times it's pretty frightening too. Not to mention the fact that we did this in the middle of a thunderstorm.
That is most definitely thunder, let's keep an eye out.
But Kirby doesn't make it look too bad because, as we've established, she's a boss and can do pretty much everything. At the top, all that was left for Kirby to do was to find a nice spot with an excellent view of the valley below, set up her hammock, and get situated for a wonderful night amongst the trees. Trees are all over the place in this world, and there's still a lot we don't know about them, especially about everything in their canopies. Tree climbing helps our buds at Cornell and Berkeley learn a little bit more about what's going on up there. So some scientists work in a lab, others work up in the air dangling from a half-inch rope. But it's all with the same goal in mind, to figure out what's going on out there. So some might call it crazy, others might say it's insane, but to Kirby the world beater, it's just another day on the job.
I like how it's cute though. What's up guys, I'm Charlie, that's Patrick, Kirby's behind the camera. Today we're in Gilroy, California at Gilroy Gardens to check out their awesome circus trees.
Oh my.
Alright, so this summer on our trip, we went to a super tiny theme park in California called Gilroy Gardens. This place had everything. Swings, roller coasters, a little train, singing cabbages, basically everything you could want in a tiny little theme park. And randomly, we found some of the craziest looking trees that we've ever seen in our entire lives. Check it out. These are trees, and they're real, and they're alive. So what could have possibly made these trees look like this? Well, that's what we were wondering, so we did some research and we figured it out. Well, it all started with a Swedish-American farmer guy named Axel Erlandsson, or as no one called him until now, Earl. He had a brother named Ludwig, who is not really important to the story at all, except, I mean, his name's Ludwig, and that's pretty cool, so it's worth mentioning. So back in 1928, Earl thought it'd be a really good idea to get into tree sculpture, and he began growing trees in different unusual shapes. He did this for 40 years and made some of the craziest tree specimens that exist in the entire world.
When children would ask Earl how he got his trees to grow like this, he would lean in real close and whisper, "I talk to them." Oh, Earl, you silly old fart, we know your secrets. You're doing this with a little help from the natural processes known as inoculation and grafting.
Cool, so basically inoculation is when two trees or branches grow so close to each other that they start to touch, and after some time passes, they eventually fuse together.
We're climbing this locust tree in front of my parents' house to check out these two branches. I guess a while ago they started growing close to each other, and then they started touching, and now check it out, they're fused. Inoculation, pretty crazy, right?
Grafting is basically the same thing as inoculation, except instead of things just happening naturally, a gardener comes out and cuts two branches and then bandages them together to encourage the fusing to happen. So it's kind of like artificial inoculation.
So Earl learned about these techniques and he used them to make his own designs.
He'd do things like grow trees close together, fix them to stakes, intensely prune them, and encourage branches to fuse.
Eventually they formed these insane tree sculptures that Earl called circus trees. Here's an example.
This is the basket tree. Earl planted 6 sycamores in a circle and wove them together as they grew. Eventually they fused to form this insane diamond pattern. Crazy talk, man. So even though it looks like one tree, it's actually 6.
Cool, now that we know the process, let's check out some more of Earl's circus trees.
You ready? Are you ready? Yes! Are you ready? I'm ready too! I'm not ready, no!
Coming up first, we got the arch tree.
This interactive piece was crafted out of 2 American sycamores fused together to form a 9.5-foot tall arching doorway as strong and sturdy as the United States of America themselves.
Oh shoot, what's this? It's the oil well.
Perched on an island amongst the beautifully landscaped South County Backroads racetrack, this bad boy doesn't suck that liquid gold out of the ground, but instead greets excited speedsters as they round the final turn and race towards the imaginary checkered flag at the ride's end.
We're riding a duck right now. There you go.
Coming in hot at number 3, we got the 4-legged giant.
Made out of 4 American sycamores, this beauty is 90 years old. Don't let its old age fool you, because located just outside the San Juan Grill and Mission Plaza, this arbol is always ready for a fiesta.
Next up, we got the emblem tree.
Another American sycamore with a weird shape in the middle that's hard to describe. It has 2 holes, 1 hole, and then another 2 holes. It's also very rectangular-ish and located outside the Pinnacles Rock Maze, which is impossible. Don't go in there, you'll be lost forever.
Is Patrick lost too?
Now we got this bad boy, the chain link.
This American sycamore originally split to form 3 holes, then 2 holes, then 1 hole, then decided to screw the whole thing and grow like a normal sycamore. Being a circus tree is just too stressful anyways.
We're on a carousel.
The local favorite, spiral staircase number 2.
Spiral staircase number 2 blows spiral staircase number 1 out of the water. Made out of 2 European ashes, this twisting miracle of a tree is definitely one of those rare cases where the sequel is better than the original.
Oh man, what the heck is this? Let's squat Kirby scallops right there.
Incredible, confusing, a tangled mess. All words people might use to describe other trees, but not this one. Our boy Earl took 3 European ashes and mangled them all together to form what we have here. A perfect anatomical representation of a group of scallops. Truly incredible.
Pat's doing an excellent job of Vanna Whiting the sideways rope rectangle.
Is a bunch of diamonds in the middle of European ash, and that's pretty much it.
And finally, Pat will bring us home with our favorite, the revolving door.
Earl exploded a single maple into 4 pieces and then fused the tips together to form this exquisite representation of everyone's favorite mall entering device. Located at the south side entrance, it's a great one to visit after a long day at the theme park.
One of the best we've seen. Pretty cool.
So as crazy as these trees look, inoculation and grafting aren't really that all uncommon. And you've probably seen examples of these techniques in your life already.
Grafting is often used in the art of bonsai, aka mini tree crafting. Artists use it to attach new branches, trunks, and all sorts of other things to create perfect little tiny trees. In really fancy gardens, you might find espaliered fruit trees. They're kind of like super basic forms of circus trees. They're trained to grow in specific shapes up against walls.
So these methods are pretty common, but hands down, Earl was the Babe Ruth of inoculation/grafting horticulture. So next time you're having dinner with your relatives and you get that same tired old question, who's the Dr. Frankenstein of tree maintenance, you finally have your answer. My man, inoculation fiend, brother of Ludwig, the Swedish steamer, Axel Erlandson.
Go.
What's up, guys? I'm Charlie, that's Pat. Kirby's behind the camera, and today we're in Giant Sequoia National Park to check out the largest single tree specimens in the entire world. Giant sequoias. What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Patrick's getting attacked by mosquitoes, and Kirby's on camera, and today we're in Humboldt Redwoods State Park checking out the largest single tree specimens in the entire world, coastal redwoods. Wait, what the heck are you talking about? Giant sequoias are the biggest. No way. Redwoods are the largest. Sequoias are. Coastal redwoods are. Sequoias are. Redwoods are.
Aren't they the same thing?
Guys, relax. You're both right.
Because they're the same thing.
Pat, they're not the same thing.
But...
Patrick. Pat, they're not. I mean, it's easy to confuse the two since they're both giant trees living in California, but they're entirely different species with entirely different scientific names.
So they're not the same thing.
Correct, Patrick. Coastal redwoods and giant sequoias are different in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, for one thing, they don't even grow in the same place. These coastal redwoods are growing in Northern California along the coast near the Pacific Ocean. Here, the fog makes things nice and wet, creating the perfect environment for these guys to grow. We're checking out these giant sequoias on a western slope of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California, where it's nice and mild and dry, which are exactly the conditions that these sequoias need for their seed cones to release their seeds. Yep, in entirely different locations. You will never find a coastal redwood growing in the same place as a giant sequoia. They reproduce differently too. Giant sequoias reproduce using seeds. So do coastal redwoods. Well, our seed cones are 3 times larger. Fine, well, sometimes coastal redwoods don't even need to use seeds. They can reproduce vegetatively, which means entire new trees can grow from pieces of other trees. So if you cut down a redwood, a new baby redwood can grow from its trunk or roots or branches that fell off. Ooh, fancy, vegetative reproduction. And how long does a coastal redwood live? Around 2,000 years. Oh, that's cute. Giant sequoias live for about 3,200 years, so. Well, the bark of a coastal redwood is a deep chocolatey brown like a warm, nutty brownie that your grandmother made just for you. Well, the bark of a giant sequoia is a bright reddish brown like a slightly discolored brownie your grandmother just made for you. Cool, they're different, we get it, but which one's the largest? It's kind of a harder question to answer than you might think. So when you're standing at the base of either tree, giant sequoias definitely look bigger because their trunks are massive. And giant sequoias are the most massive trees in the entire world because they have the most volume. But coastal redwoods are the tallest trees in the entire world. They have the greatest height, and they kind of kick giant sequoia's butt in this category. This is possible because each tree species grows differently. Giant sequoias are super wide, thick trees that are pretty tall, but coastal redwoods are skinnier trees that are crazy tall. Think of them like this. If a giant sequoia were an athlete, it would be a 6'5", 300-pound NFL lineman. If a coastal redwood were an athlete, it would be a 6'10", 250-pound NBA center. One's bulkier and heavier, and one's thinner and taller. It's as simple as that. As an example of this idea, let's choose an all-star from each tree species. The giant sequoia all-star would be by unanimous decision coming out of Sequoia National Park, our man, the big boy, General Sherman. He is a behemoth. With a base diameter of 36.5 feet, this monster is 52,500 cubic feet and weighs in at 4 million pounds. He is the most massive single living tree in the entire world. The most massive one, period. He also hits the height chart at 275 feet, so I mean he's pretty tall too. Up against this heavyweight is our coastal redwood all-star, coming to you from a hidden location in Northern California. Big stretch, the tall boy, Hyperion. Hyperion's exact location has been a closely guarded secret since it was discovered in 2006. Only like 6 people know, and they're not telling anybody, so we have no idea where it is. But we do know that this guy is super tall. Saying Hyperion is a tall tree is an enormous understatement because he is the tallest tree in the entire world. No tree is taller. He's just under 380 feet, about 105 feet taller than General Sherman. Still though, this guy's pretty skinny. With a base diameter of only about 16 feet, Its volume isn't even half of General Sherman's at 18,600 cubic feet. So in a head-to-head battle for tallest tree in the world, Hyperion wins. For most volume, General Sherman wins. So which is the largest tree in the world? I guess that kind of depends what you're talking about. You can see how incredibly different these two types of trees are, but at the same time though, you can consider both of these giants to be record breakers in different categories in the natural world. Coastal redwoods are the largest trees in the world in terms of height, but giant sequoias are the largest trees in the world in terms of volume. So I guess it's perfect, everybody wins.
Yeah, I guess that works. Yeah, I guess that works.
All right.
It's cool with me.
Nice.
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
So they're not the same thing.
Patrick.
Move back.
Pat, you always gotta be in the background. What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Patrick's over there.
Project a little. Sound more excited.
All right. Oregon at Holiday.
Where are we?
What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Kirby's on camera. Patrick's over there. Today we're in Corvallis, Oregon at Holiday Tree Farms, checking out some Christmas trees.
Perfect.
Alright, so while traveling up the west coast last summer, we planned a pretty awesome side trip to probably the most festive place in the entire world, save for the North Pole, Corvallis, Oregon. You see, the Boomtime crew loves Christmas, and naturally, one of our favorite parts about Christmas is the trees. There are 350 million Christmas trees growing on farms in the US right now, and you can find the most in the state of Oregon. The best trees in Oregon are grown in the Willamette Valley, and the top tree farm in the Willamette Valley is right near Corvallis, Holiday Tree Farms. They're the largest Christmas tree supplier not only in the valley or even in Oregon or even in the US. They're the largest Christmas tree producer in the entire world. Pretty intense stuff, so we had to go check it out. So we met up with some friends, Mark and Jeff. They work at Holiday, and they were nice enough to show us around and clue us in as to how they grow their trees. Mark and Jeff have 6.5 million Christmas trees on the ground in their farm. They all start as seeds inside this big old refrigerator, their seed bank. These seeds are stored at a chilly 0 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year until it's their time to grow. After waiting in the fridge for a bit, each seed is planted in soil, prepped, and grown super close together in the nursery. There are usually over 1 million Christmas tree seedlings growing in the greenhouses at Holiday Tree Farm. They'll wait here for about 2 months, getting water, soaking up the sunlight, being cared for, sometimes getting a nice sawdust shower, just hanging out and growing a bit. So it takes about 6 or 7 years for these trees to become fully grown. Then it's harvest time. Each year they harvest 1 million Christmas trees at Holiday Tree Farms for the Christmas season. 1 million. That's a lot of trees. And they have to harvest everything super quickly because everyone tends to want their Christmas trees at pretty much the same time. So what's the fastest way to get 1 million Christmas trees out of the field and ready to ship around the world? So they could use trucks or like a bunch of ATVs, or maybe they could flood the place like a cranberry bog. Those might work, maybe, but they figured out another way. This is where things get pretty epic at Holiday because they found out that the best way to move Christmas trees around is by helicopter. It's so neat. They sent us some old harvest footage to check out, and it's insane. Here's how it works. First, workers cut down the trees with chainsaws and then chuck them into piles. Those piles are bundled up. Then the helicopters fly over carrying enormous hooks dangling down on long cables. The copters will pick up the bundles, zip over to a truck or a processing area, and kind of swing the tree bundle over and then drop them. Then they'll just zip right on back to pick up another. These pilots are insanely skilled. They barely slow down as they transfer bundle after bundle of Christmas trees, getting them ready for delivery. After harvesting, it's time to ship. Holiday sends their Christmas trees all over the world to Hawaii, Mexico, Central America, Guam, even Asia, to help people all over the world have a more festive holiday. Our time at the Christmas tree farm was so great, and we learned some pretty neat stuff too. Most importantly, that all Christmas trees are not the same. Check out these 3 shots of Christmas trees right here. All these are sold as Christmas trees, but they're all different.
So if you think these trees look pretty much exactly the same, you're not alone. We couldn't tell the difference between any of the trees that we saw at Holiday. So Mark and Jeff always had to clue us in on what kinds we were looking at. Then Pat and Kirby, who were working the cameras, whispered the names at the beginning of each shot so we'd know later on.
Nordman.
Noble.
Noble. Douglas fir.
Nordman. Noble.
Noble. Grand fir.
Douglas.
Douglas. Nordman. Nordman. Dougie.
Douglas is...
Douglas. Douglas.
Doug. Noble. Babies. Is this Noble or Nordman? Just kidding, Nordman babies.
But after our tour of the farm, we pretty much got it down. So buckle up, buddy, because it's time to become a real true Christmas tree aficionado. Alright, so basically you've got your three main types of Christmas trees: pine, fir, and spruce. The secret to telling them apart lies here in their needles, or basically the leaves of the tree. So you check out the needles. If they're in a little pack, like the needles come in a bundle of 2 or 3 or 5, then game over. You're looking at a pine. You can remember it like this: pack of pine. You got a pack of pine there, yeah? A pack of pine. Cool, I think you got it. If needles aren't in a pack, so they grow as singles, then you have a fir or a spruce. But which one? Well, let's check it out. So reach into that tree. If the needles are prickly as heck, like they're super pointy and it just kind of hurts to touch the tree, then you have a spruce. Spruces are the worst because each needle ends in a really sharp point. It's like a tiny little sword. It's absolutely brutal. So prickly, spruce. Prickly needles, spruce. Awesome. If the needles are pretty soft, then you have a fir. Fir needles are rounded off at the end. They're much nicer to touch. So soft, fir. Soft, fir. Prickly spruce, soft fir. Prickly spruce, soft fir. Think you got it. Easy enough to remember. And if you're standing there like, what the heck, Charlie? I still have no idea what the heck this is. There's one more test you can do. Pick off one of those needles and try to roll it between your fingers. Spruce needles are 4-sided and they should roll pretty easily. Fir needles are flat. They should be pretty tough to roll. So spruce will roll, firs will not. Spruce, rolling pretty nicely. Firs, don't really budge. After that, you should pretty much have it. So let's review. Pack, pine, boom, easy. Now for the single needle trees. Prickly, spruce. Soft, fir. Or, that sucker rolls, it's a spruce. If it doesn't roll, it's a fir. Oh shoot, look at you, you Christmas tree expert, ready to impress all the ladies and fellas next time the holidays roll around. Holiday Tree Farm's top selling tree is the Douglas fir, and it's kind of alright, I guess. I mean, they're firs, so they're pretty soft. They're kind of bluish green, so they look kind of nice, and they hold their needles for a while. But there's another tree that definitely has a strong hold on our top spot. We feel like clumped pine needles aren't really classic Christmas, so we're not gonna go with a pine. And spruces are the worst because they're prickly and hurt when you touch them, and who wants a Christmas tree that can injure you? The unofficial, official Nature Boomtime endorsed Christmas tree is the beautiful, the lustrous, the impeccable grand fir. These trees are beautiful. These beauties retain their needles for ages, but best of all, they have a smell that just kicks it out of the park. The smell of Christmas is the smell of a grand fir, no question about it. It brings you back to every gingerbread house, every snowman, every sweet heartwarming holiday memory ever experienced. It's that good. I'm exaggerating, but like only a little here. So next time the holidays roll around, look out for one of these bad boys, a grand fir, the official, unofficial Christmas tree of Nature Boomtime. What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Kirby's on camera. Patrick's over there, and today we're in a rainforest in the state of Washington.
What?
Believe it. All right, so today we're hanging out in Hoh Rain Forest in Olympic National Park. Now, there aren't any monkeys or toucans hanging out here, but it's still pretty legit. So yeah, a rainforest in the United States. It totally happens. So there are two different kind of rainforests in the world. There are tropical rainforests with their bananas and their colorful butterflies and their giraffes.
There aren't any giraffes in rainforests.
There are.
What? And there's also tropical rainforest, lesser known, underappreciated, but just as enchanting second cousin, temperate rainforests.
Oh, pretty cool, Charlie. But what's a temperate rainforest? Ah, excellent question, Charlie. Well, to figure that out, let's toss it over to our buddy Paul Alaback, Professor Emeritus of Forest Ecology at the University of Montana and father of the North American accepted definition of temperate rainforests.
Temperate rainforests. Over 1,400 millimeters annual precipitation, cool summers stemming from an equable year-round climate, mean annual temperature between 4 and 12 degrees Celsius, and infrequent fire, except in the Redwood fog belt.
So basically what Professor Paul is saying is that if you have a forest, a ton of rain, and a cool summer year after year, then you might just have yourself a nice little temperate rainforest.
And that's exactly what we have here in Olympic National Park. A forest, rain, cool temps, and consistency. Because it's all about consistency.
And as far as rainforests go, this one's definitely top dog because there's more biomass here in Hoh Rain Forest in Olympic National Park than there is anywhere else. Biomass is a term that scientists use to help them quantify how much living stuff is in an area, and there are a whole different bunch of ways that you can calculate it. You can do it by just adding up the living things in an area, the living things plus the dead stuff that used to be alive. You can look at one species or all organically bound carbon, but usually you just add up all the plants, animals, and tiny microorganisms in an area. We've traveled to all different kinds of forests. Underwater forests, out-of-water forests, forests that didn't really have too much going on, and forests that were bumping with all sorts of nature stuff.
But as far as anyone knows, there's no other forest or place in the entire world that has more living stuff per acre than this place right here. Hoh Rain Forest.
It's pretty nuts because there's really so much to see here. Massive fir and spruce trees jet up through the carpet of wildflowers and ferns that cover the forest floor. Everything on the ground is surrounded by oxalis and salmonberry, making this place look like a gosh darn storybook. Fallen logs, called nurse logs, are lying all over the place, supporting the next generation of understory dwellers. And almost everything you see is covered in a thick, fluffy layer of the stuff called club moss. Imagine the most magical, enchanted fairy woodland possible. Well, we found it, because it's right here, in the state of Washington. Who would have thought? There's at least 3 times as much biomass here in Hoh Rain Forest than in any tropical rainforest anywhere. That's crazy. That's like jamming 3 tropical rainforests into one. A triple tropical rainforest. Whoa. So we obviously had to get a better look. So we grabbed our gear early one morning and set out to find the most magical tree in the whole forest.
Hey, Charles.
Morning.
What are you doing today?
It's a beautiful day in Hoh Rain Forest. We're gonna go climb a tree in the rainforest. Patrick's over here getting his glide cam ready. We're set to go. This is the one. It's a beautiful day in the rainforest. 60 feet. 60. How you doing?
Dude, so good.
Doing so good?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Did you enjoy your climb?
Yeah, I did. It was pretty easy.
Yeah. That boy. lessons time.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Pat's over here. Kirby's on camera. And today we're in western Montana in Bitterroot National Forest. And we're here to check out this guy, the McCart Fire Tower. Yo, check it out. Here's a fire tower that we stayed in. Pretty legit, right? This thing is awesome. But wait, back up a minute. We're in the middle of Bitterroot National Forest. And this is the only building for miles and miles. But it's a very important building, or I mean, at least it was at one time. Back in the day, about 100 years ago, the fate of the entire forest laid in the hands of the man or woman who was staying in this tiny little hut. Because this thing right here is a fire tower. Back in 1900, the people managing forests in the US had an enormous problem. There were forest fires all over the place, and they were never able to stop them before massive destruction occurred. So they started coming up with possible solutions.
Son of a gun! Patrick!
Yes, sir.
I'll pay you 60 cents to sit at the top of that really tall tree and look for fires all day.
60 cents?
Yes.
Every day?
Yes.
I'm on it.
Boom! So that's how the earliest fire lookouts started. People were hired to sit at super high points with unobstructed views in the middle of forests, doing nothing but looking for fires all day. These fire watchers proved to be pretty effective. They were able to spot smoke from fires and pinpoint a fire's location quicker than anyone had before, so the fires could be put out before any massive destruction occurred. But despite the fact that they were so effective, they weren't really used that much. That was until 1910, when chaos absolutely ripped through the northwest of the United States. It was called the Big Blow Up or the Big Burn, but most call it the Great Fire of 1910. This event was absolutely nuts. A small fire that broke out in Montana spread like crazy, super crazy. 3 million acres were burned across Idaho, Montana, and Washington. 3 million in 2 days. 87 people died. Several towns were burnt entirely to a crisp, like a torched marshmallow. Gone. After the Great Fire, the U.S. Forest Service gained a heap ton of support, and their priority now was fighting forest fires, and their method, fire towers. Around 1911, people started realizing that these fire watchers were doing a pretty good job, so they sweetened the deal a little and made them swanky cabins to watch from, like this one. The basic outline for these lookouts was summed up pretty well by a super old guy named Court Du Bois in his page-turner, Systematic Fire Protection in the California Forests.
The lookout man's dwelling, office, and workroom should be centered in one house, on one floor, and in one room. The room cannot be less than 12 feet square and must be so constructed that at any moment of the day, with the turn of a head, he can see his whole field. He must be fixed so that when he is cooking, eating, reading, writing, dressing, washing his clothes, walking about, sitting down, working out, or shaving, he cannot help but be in the best position to see.
So these tiny little houses were actually pretty sweet. I mean, they had 360-degree unobstructed views of the forest, so you could see for miles. But remember, the people that were living here had to do nothing but look for forest fires all day. What brought the whole operation to the next level was this, the Osborne Firefinder. The Osborne Firefinder, created by another old guy to add to our old guy Hall of Fame, William Bushnell Osborne Jr. But we just call him good old Bush. So our buddy Bush is important because he developed and perfected this weird little instrument thing that helps fire spotters pinpoint the exact location of fires on a map. Here's how it works. You see a fire. You spin the finder so it's pointing towards the fire. You look through this tiny little hole. You line everything up. You get a compass reading from this little ring. Move this metal thing to get an angle. Put it all together to find out where the fire is. Look it over to the telephone. Tell the guys what's up. Fire! Some other guys fight the fire. You save the forest. And you save the whole gosh darn world. All thanks to our buddy Bush Osborne. Thank you, Bush. In their heyday, there were 8,000 fire lookout towers across the United States. Eventually, satellites were invented, and this whole thing became a lot easier to do. Today, there are 2,000 fire lookout towers across the US, and 400 are still in use. Which remind us of a simpler time when people got paid to just sit around all day and look at the forest. What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. Last summer, my friends Kirby, Patrick, and I went to Fish Lake National Forest in Utah to hang out, have a good time, enjoy some nature, but also to find the largest living organism in the entire world. All right, try to think of the largest living organism in the entire world.
A giant squid.
Elephants.
A blue whale.
Dinosaurs.
Are dead now, but they were pretty big and alive at some point in time. All these things are pretty big, but no, the largest living thing in the world is a tree.
Like a giant sequoia.
Yeah, like my boy General Sherman out in California.
Sequoias are pretty huge, but the largest living thing in the whole world is actually in Utah. It's this guy right here. He's a tree, and his name is Pando. But obviously that's not all of Pando. This is also part of Pando. So is this guy, and so is this one. These guys over here, and that one, and so is this one. Pretty much all of this kind of tree and the surrounding 106 acres make up one organism, and his name is Pando, and he is massive. You see, Pando's a quaking aspen tree, and they reproduce a little differently than other trees out there. Most trees make more trees by first creating tiny flowers that get pollinated and form seeds, which later germinate and grow into other trees. But quaking aspens like Pando prefer a different method. They reproduce clonally. So a single quaking aspen tree has a pretty massive root system. Every so often, those roots shoot up and create another tree. This can happen over and over and over until you get enormous systems of trees, like this one. All these trees are genetically identical. They have the exact same DNA, change colors at the exact same time in the fall, and have the same branching pattern. So people refer to them as clones. So all these trees started out a long time ago from one single seed. And the amazing thing is that even though there looks like there's thousands of trees around here, they're all interconnected through one root system. So we can think of them together as one single organism. It might be easier to think about Pando as just one giant root system. That's the main part of the organism. And every once in a while, it just shoots up another arm, which is a tree growing out of the ground. Most quaking aspens spread around an area of about 1 to 20 acres, but our buddy Pando here is about 106 acres, shooting up a whopping 50,000 tree trunks and weighing in at approximately 13 million pounds, which is about the same weight as 6,500 giant squids, 867 African elephants, 32.5 blue whales, or 3 General Shermans, making it the largest living thing in the entire world. It has more dry mass than anything alive on the earth right now. Dry mass is key here because there's some mycologists who might claim that a fungal mat in Oregon is actually the largest living thing in the world. And they're right, that fungal mat is absolutely huge. But we're talking about dry mass here, which excludes water. And in this category, Pando kind of gets first by a long shot. The cool thing about reproducing clonally is that it allows trees to live for a really long time. Some people have estimated that Pando is around 80,000 years old, which is crazy. I mean, he looks so sprite and young and chipper as ever, doesn't he? Cool, but reality check here, Pando's dying. He's lived for a really long time and unfortunately has taken quite a hit. There's been disease, fire suppression, insect infestation, and deer just eating up all the new saplings. And now for whatever reason, the old parts of Pando are dying and there's not a lot of new growth to replace it. And the thing is, no one has really any idea why that's happening. So while the forest rangers scramble to save this big man, we like to let him shine for the little time he has left. Congratulations, Pando! You are a Nature Boomtime approved plant. Hey guys, I'm Charlie. Today I'm hanging out in Savannah, Georgia with my friend Kirby, and we came all the way down here to check out this stuff, Tillandsia usinoides, just a fancy word for Spanish moss. Cool. All right, so today we're taking a quick break from trees and talking about something else. Spanish moss. Why? Because Spanish moss is actually super interesting. Just wait, you'll see. And in places like Savannah, Georgia, in the south, if you have trees, you probably have Spanish moss too, because this stuff, it really is everywhere.
Spanish moss is all over the place in the South, and I'm not exaggerating. It's pretty much all over the place.
We found it in Savannah growing on the trees, on the park benches, lying on the sidewalk, making everything look super old and pretty spooky too.
There's absolutely nothing like it in the north where I'm from. It kind of looks like a vine that's slowly taking over a town, or like Mother Nature just vomited over everything. But the thing is, that's not really true at all.
After visiting Savannah, Kirby and I found out that a lot of the things we thought we knew about Spanish moss weren't true, so it's a pretty misleading plant. I mean, for one thing, it's got a pretty sneaky name, Spanish moss. The thing is, here's what we found out.
Spanish moss is not Spanish.
Yeah, how weird is that? Spanish moss is not Spanish. It's actually native to the southeastern United States, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, so it's as Spanish as Kirby, which means it's not really that Spanish at all. And the thing is, there's more.
Spanish moss is not even a moss.
Super weird. Spanish moss is not a moss. One of the things that makes mosses are the fact that they reproduce using spores. But Spanish moss reproduces using seeds, not spores, so it's not a moss.
So yeah, this guy isn't even a moss. So Spanish moss isn't Spanish, and it isn't a moss. Then what is it? Well, most people think it's an invasive plant parasite that's killing trees, which is totally understandable because, I mean, just look around. It's all over the place. Looks like it's sucking the nutrients right from the trees. But the thing is, that's not true either.
Because Spanish moss isn't damaging these trees. It's actually pretty harmless. Even though it's grown all over them, it's not hurting them. So we have a super tricky plant on our hands here. Spanish moss is not Spanish, and it's not a moss, and it's not killing trees like people think it is, so then what the heck is going on here? Spanish moss, you sly dog, what are you up to? Okay, so after a little bit of research, Kirby and I uncovered the truth. So here we go. Spanish moss is a flowering plant, like a tulip or a rose that grows on trees. And they reproduce by producing these tiny little seeds that look like this. They have these little hairy parts that act kind of like sails. They can catch the wind. So the wind picks up these seeds, which then fly through the air until they land on another surface, like a tree, and begin to grow.
And they can grow in a whole variety of places because they're air plants, aka epiphytes. More fancy words.
Cool. So what exactly is an epiphyte? Well, most plants like trees or flowers you see growing in a garden soak up the majority of the water and nutrients they need through their roots. But epiphytes don't do that because epiphytes don't have roots. They're plants that can harmlessly grow on other plants because they get all of the water and nutrients they need from the air, rain, and some of the dead junk lying around them. So Spanish moss is one of these plants, an epiphyte. And if we zoomed in on a piece of Spanish moss, it kind of look like this on the right, covered in a bunch of tiny scales that are trapping all of the nutrients that Spanish moss needs to grow. So it doesn't need roots at all because these scales are trapping all the nutrients it needs. It doesn't even need to be in soil really. They kind of just exist, attached to random things, hanging out all over the place. Because of that, they can grow in other plants like trees, just draped over a limb or two without harming them at all. Alright, think we got it. Parasites suck the life out of other plants. Epiphytes, super chill. They're just kind of hanging around. Spanish moss are epiphytes.
Specifically, Spanish moss is in the family Bromeliaceae. And you want to know something crazy? Guess what else is in that family?
What?
Pineapples. Yeah, crazy, right? So, Spanish moss is more closely related to pineapples than anything from Spain. So maybe it's time for a rebranding. Ditch the old name and come up with something new. Like pineapple hair, or the friendly spaghetti plant, or the chill tree toupee, you know? Just a couple ideas. Sure makes a lot more sense to me.
The last time.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? I'm Charlie. That's Kirby.
Hey!
Today we're backcountry camping in Everglades National Park. Why? Because Kirby likes wrestling crocodiles.
No.
Actually, here to check out some of the coolest trees in the entire world. These guys around me. Mangroves.
All right, so first, a little bit of background. While Pat was away at school, Kirby and I decided to take a quick trip down to the southern tip of Florida for a little canoeing that turned into a lot of canoeing. Like a lot of canoeing. Like 27 hours of canoeing over the course of 3 days. So much canoeing. We spent almost the whole time navigating through these insane tree tunnels. How neat are these? Super neat and confusing. We got lost a few times, but we figured out that these tunnels were pretty much entirely made of trees called mangroves.
All right, there are a bunch of different kinds of mangroves in the world, but the ones around me are called red mangroves. Why red mangroves? I honestly have no idea, but I do know that there's some pretty cool trees.
All right, so in the world of mangroves, you got white mangroves that look pretty normal, black mangroves, which are a little strange. You got a couple other kinds that may or may not exist, and red mangroves, which are definitely the craziest looking mangroves out there. I mean, for one thing, check it out. They look like they have a bunch of little tiny trunks that are tangled up in a big old mess.
These are actually roots called prop roots or stilt roots.
Yeah, so even though they're above ground, they're actually part of the root system of the tree. It's like a super special kind of root called a prop root.
And they're pretty important to the function of the entire tree.
Without these prop roots, red mangroves wouldn't survive, and neither would this entire Florida coastline. So we're right near the ocean right now, and tides, waves, and storm surges beat down really hard on the coast. What these prop roots do is they slow things down a little, kind of like a break wall at the beach. They cause sediment to settle down, and check it out. This actually pushes the coastline out quite a bit because it prevents dirt and stuff from getting washed away. Yeah, so this is all kind of cool. I mean, they keep the land in place. Pretty neat, but I mean, that just seems to come as a result of the way they're shaped. The question is, why are they shaped that way in the first place? So this is actually a tough question, but we think we figured it out, so let's give it a shot. All right, strap on those goggles, let's do this.
Casey Science, take 4. Rolling.
Cool. So why are red mangroves shaped so weird? Well, this is why, because trees need oxygen to survive, which is a little counterintuitive, right? Because everyone knows trees release oxygen as a result of photosynthesis. Well, that's true, but they do use a little bit of oxygen too for the same reasons that we do. It's called respiration, or basically the process of burning fuel or energy. It looks like this. So we have energy or fuel in the form of carbs and fats, and to that we add some stuff like oxygen, and boom, that's when the magic happens. We burn that energy fuel to run our bodies. So plants do this pretty much in the same way. And in cells that perform photosynthesis, like in the leaves and branches, it's no real problem at all because the oxygen that they make allows them to burn that energy fuel. But what about in the cells that don't perform photosynthesis, like the cells in the roots? They can't make oxygen down there, so what happens? How do they use up energy? Well, most trees get a bit of oxygen from the tiny bit of air that exists in the dirt. They just soak it right up. So, boom, respiration can happen down there without any issues. But mangroves can't do this because they live in water, which actually kind of presents a major problem because it's super hard to get oxygen when you're underwater, which is tough because remember, trees need oxygen. So let's pretend that our little tree here is growing in some water, and since that soil is completely submerged, there's no air down there. You know how you or I can't breathe underwater? Neither can these roots. They can't get the oxygen they need, they can't use up the energy fuel, respiration like straight up doesn't happen. The roots die, the whole tree's dead, and everything is just completely horrible. Unless you have prop roots. Oh man, prop roots, major game changer, turning everything around for the red mangroves. So we need to get some oxygen to those underwater roots somehow, and the prop roots stretch all the way above the water line where they can get to that oxygen.
So prop roots kind of act like a snorkel, providing oxygen to parts of the plant that are underwater.
They soak up oxygen above the water and transport it down to the roots below the water. Yeah, right, that's exactly what we're looking for. So now all that energy fuel can be added with that oxygen. Let chemistry do its thing, you know, little reaction here, little reaction there, and pow. We're burning that energy fuel, no problem. So breaking it down super simply, roots need oxygen. Roots in water can't get oxygen. Prop roots supply oxygen to underwater roots. Boom, done. That easy. So all this is pretty neat, but we can't talk about mangroves without mentioning the coolest plant trait possibly / most definitely ever. The most amazing thing about mangroves is the way that they make more mangroves.
One word, vivipary.
Vivipary. How mangroves make more mangroves. This is gonna blow your mind. But first, let's think about the way that most trees make more trees.
Alright, so most trees develop seeds, drop them to the ground, and then those seeds start growing only after they're away from the tree.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like trees make seeds, then they drop them to the ground, and then those seeds grow. Seems pretty straightforward. Like an oak tree makes acorns that fall to the ground and then they grow in the dirt. That's how they make more oak trees. But to make more mangroves, mangroves do something that's just a little different. It's called vivipary. Their seeds germinate and start growing before they've even fallen off the tree. So this is what mangrove seed pods look like. And you can see they're still on the mangrove tree, but they've already started growing. They have little leaves on the top, and on the bottom, they have these tiny roots. So here's the basic journey of a mangrove seed pod. If we zoom in on this mangrove a bit, we can see that it has some seed pods already. Sweet, and they look like they have roots too. Awesome. They're alive and growing already. Eventually, they'll fall off the tree into the water. Well, they'll float downstream a bit until they hit a nice piece of soil and anchor themselves there with their already existing roots. Then they'll keep growing. So it's almost like they had a head start a little. Not sure about you guys, but this kind of blew my mind.
Just sit back and think about that for a bit. This is basically the plant equivalent of live birth. The seeds germinate and develop roots before they even leave the tree.
Charlie's getting pretty hyped up. So is our scientist. We're pretty into mangroves over here. So boom, vivipary, live tree birth, mangroves, hammers, Kirby, sketchy park signs, canoeing, awesome. Hey guys, I'm Charlie.
And I'm Patrick.
And today we're hanging out in Washington, D.C., exploring the Cherry Blossom Festival. Cool, let's roll. All right, so Pat and I live just north of Chicago, which is awesome because we have Lake Michigan and Millennium Park and all that good stuff. But it's not so awesome because our winters are absolutely brutal. So it's no exaggeration to say we're pretty psyched when spring rolls around. Last March, Pat and I had enough. The snow had driven us to our limit. We were losing our minds when one morning, Patrick had the perfect idea.
Whoa!
The Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C. So imagine this. You're in the capital of the United States of America, surrounded by 3,700 cherry trees, all ablaze in a thunderous floral wave of springtime glory. Basically, each spring, cherry trees are covered in like 1 million tiny blossoms. And in Washington, D.C., there's like 1 million cherry trees. And every year, every single cherry tree in the entire city blooms at the exact same time. And this year, we had to be there. But it's much harder to catch than you might think. I mean, for one thing, the trees are only in bloom for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, the flowers wilt and then they just fall off. So there's really only 2 weeks where you could see anything. And on top of that, the peak bloom period is only 4 days. That's when 70% of the trees are in bloom, which means it's the best time to visit. So that means there's really only 4 days where you can see anything good. And on top of that, people have absolutely no idea when this is gonna happen. Even scientists don't know the exact date because there are 1 million things that determine when the cherry blossoms bloom. So it's pretty much always up in the air. All we know is that maybe it might happen sometime in between roughly March 15th and April 18th. And we can't even be sure we'd make it on time because even after the trees bloom, if there's a super cold day and the temperature dips below freezing, the blossoms are gonna die. Super quick, just dead. So you could see how ending up in DC at the right time could be a little tough, but we had a trick up our sleeve.
the indicator tree.
Amongst the 3,700 cherry trees in Washington, D.C., there is one tree, the indicator tree, that, for whatever reason, can't wait to bloom with the rest of them. Consistently, the indicator tree, that's this one, every single year blooms exactly 7 to 10 days before the other cherry trees. 7 to 10 days every year. Once the indicator tree blooms, you better get ready to go to DC because you only have 10 days before the real party starts. And we had to be at that party. So we prepared ourselves to get the indicator tree's signal. Fuel in the car, bags were packed, everything was in order, and we were ready at any moment for the day to come.
Down the hall, and then all of a sudden the guy was like,
We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming with this important public service announcement from the National Park Service and our nation's capital. The indicator tree has bloomed. I repeat, the indicator tree has bloomed. Cherry blossoms will soon be everywhere, covering Washington,
We got 10
D.C.
days.
with a
Ooh, good call, Pat. Indicator tree, 10 days, then it's game time. So we waited a bit, then...
Run, go! All right, buddy, let's go.
So we hopped in the car, and after a quick 12-hour drive, we arrived at our friend Mike's house in D.C. And oh man, did we hit the nail on the head? Yes, we did. Boom, we crushed it. Washington, D.C., thousands of cherry trees, peak bloom, and we were there. It was absolutely insane. So much more intense than we expected. The weather was perfect, the monuments looked beautiful, and there were flowers everywhere. Our friends Mike and Ann spent 2 whole days showing us around the National Mall, and we had a blast. And we learned so much. Pat's gonna break down the highlights for you.
Heck yeah, I am.
A little more behind the scenes info about this incredible cherry blossom explosion fest. You ready, Pat?
You know it.
All right, let's go.
Is it going?
Yeah.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
Or should I look there?
There you go.
Close enough.
All right, what you got about the history of these trees? Like, why are there thousands of cherry trees in DC? Seems like a lot.
Oh, I've got the whole backstory. Tell you what, you buy us tickets for the paddle boats, I'll tell you everything I know.
All right, deal. Let's hear it.
Make sure to, get a little bit. So, back in 1909, for reasons unknown, Japan gifted the United States with 2,000 cherry trees. However, we found that they were infected with invasive species and insects.
So William Taft, the president at the time, authorized the burning of the trees. They burned them.
Japan, instead of getting angry at us for burning 2,000 of their presents to us, they sent 3,000 more trees. And this time they weren't infested with anything, so we started planting them all. It took over 7 years to plant those 3,000 trees. And now you have the tidal basin surrounded by these blooming cherry trees.
That was awesome.
Cool. And how come they all bloom at the same time? I mean, it's pretty convenient for us because it looks fantastic, but there's got to be a reason, right?
Oh, definitely, Charlie. Definitely.
So, these trees behind me, these cherry blossoms, they all reproduce at the same time because of pollination. Biologically speaking, the main purpose of life is to reproduce. By all blooming at the same time, they have a higher chance of being pollinated and therefore produce more little cherry trees.
Ah, super neat, Pat. You got a favorite tree?
Of course, the indicator tree.
Of course, we totally found it, right?
Oh, heck yeah, we found it.
Okay, so we found it. This is the indicator tree. We found it because we matched it to a picture online that kind of helped. Also, almost all the petals have fallen off. It blooms 10 days in advance of the other trees, which are in full bloom right now. Also, there's a tag on it that we looked online, and that's the indicator tree, so some good investigative work by us.
You feel good about it?
I feel fantastic. I think I nailed it.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Japan. Thanks, Indicator Tree. And thank you, DC, for an awesome Cherry Blossom Festival. Way to go, Pat.
Good job, Charlie. So, I guess we go back home now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hey, it was a good time, man.
Yeah, you're right, Pat. That was pretty awesome.